In an ideal world, you want iron sharpening iron. And these systems are not made to be these soft, pliable things. They are made to be attacked. They're adversarial systems.
How's it going, lovely audience? Seth Estrada here, and in this episode, I'm so excited to bring to you the Haven Protocol project. Now, if you remember, if you've been following the channel for a long time, I interviewed the first generation developer and community team from Haven Protocol before there was a changing of the guard and before there was any kind of a shift in their roadmap. I've been able to see firsthand how it has evolved, but how the core mission has stayed the same. Pierre and I talk a lot about how far they've come, about what that's taken, about how you have to wrangle a team and a community to be able to get there. I'm joined by NrdGrl, who helps with part of the interview, asking some questions related to tribalism and related to community. But then we talk a lot about design decisions that I think will be very relevant in the coming months and years. Here's the interview, largely unedited. Enjoy. Being sort of like somewhat caught in between the controversy between Dungeon, the early, first gen dev team for Haven, and then Sebastian, right? That was crazy, but I've come to find out, for my part, I've come to grow in respect for some of what Sebastian has done to the space, for the space rather. He is a big contributor, but he's also a bit of an ass, right?
Sometimes those two things go hand in hand, and sometimes one compounds the other.
Yeah. And now I've come around to the opinion that he's net positive for the space. He's done a lot more good, but he's done it largely behind the scenes. So yeah, kind of weird.
Criticism is a good thing. In an ideal world, you want iron sharpening iron. And these systems are not made to be these soft, pliable things. They are made to be attacked. They're adversarial systems. And those adversaries can come from a range of different perspectives, whether it's kind of social, whether it's economic, whether it's technological, whether it could just be a contributor or an active developer. So I think we've seen a wide range of them. I am under no illusions that will be probably just a snippet of the adversarial conditions that we'll face over the future. But ideally, if you have the right mindset and you are in this for the long term, you'll take these as opportunities to learn, to grow, and to battle test the systems so that they can stand up against whatever adversaries might come in the future. So I think from a builder's perspective, it's just adjusting your mindset in the right way to be able to kind of deal with all the trials and tribulations that you are sure to face. Yeah.
Well, brilliant that's your opinion of it. You weren't a rugby player, were you, at any point? Not to dox.
I was pretty good at rugby.
Okay, because I was going to say that's the sort of opinion that somebody who's played a sport that is arguably more difficult than American football. That I'm getting a sense for who Pierre is really in real life.
We won't get into the rugby versus NFL debate.
Well, here's the thing: you'd have a willing participant who would gladly turn on the NFL over here. I've never been a big NFL fan, and I mean MMA I can get into. Sports where when somebody hits you full contact, you're fully permitted by the rules to punch the other opponent, like to punch your opponent in the face. I'm okay with that. Like I can get down with that as a sport. Because then it's like, hey,
subsidized violence is always an interesting thing, especially when you can turn it into a national or a global sport.
Yeah, right. I think the NHL has it right. I think that the rugby leagues have it right. It's like, okay, sure, maybe you'll get a penalty, but then you're back in the game. It's not like it's not like the main organizing body is going to fine you and then you're out of the leagues for a year. That's just dumb.
Yeah.
So anyway, so yeah, that you heard it here first. Seth thinks the NFL is for pansies and whatever.
So
really
did
big pansies.
You did hit record, Seth?
I did.
Okay, sorry. It doesn't the red. It's not showing that red thing on my screen. So
I'm using OBS. I prefer to record clandestinely. So we're on the honor system. You're taking my word for for us having not recorded before and recording now.
Okay.
But let's be real. That's the world that we live in, right? We live in a surveillance state. You never know. Not really.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah, definitely. Even isn't that sort of the reason for projects like Haven, because of the surveillance state? So I don't know. We've talked about Haven a little bit on this show before, and I know, Seth, that you've interviewed other members of the Haven team from earlier in the project. But if it's okay, can we just roll back just a little bit? I'm curious about how the project got started, what the problem you were trying to solve for was, just because, I kind of came to the conclusion that something like Haven needed to exist before I knew that Haven existed. So when I found out about it, I was really enthusiastic, about the project. So I'm just curious how you got there.
So that's that's a potentially long-winded answer. So I'll try to give you the most succinct version possible. So in essence, the problem has always been simple. However, the solution has always been complex. And such is the case when you're trying to solve simple problems on the surface. So at the beginning of Haven, the two original developers basically envisioned this system for having an offshore bank account in your back pocket, a system where you could effectively choose the amount of volatility or stability that you would like to have according to your own personal risk profile. And they had also decided to do it on Monero because it has the best privacy out of any coin on the market. And there's lots of different debates whether optional privacy versus default privacy is the right approach. But we take the approach that default privacy is the only way to do privacy. And it has to be at a systemic base level, not at some layer 2 or some other kind of intermediary layer. So these guys had basically started working on the project. They started to get a little bit of traction. And actually the way that I found out about it was because it was originally got leaked that it was going to be part of a pump and dump scam, not a part, and it wasn't being done or organized by the original developers. It was just some other pump and dump. I think Telegram group who had latched onto it, thought it was a cool idea, and they were basically just going to run their little scam for however long it was going to be. Those screenshots then got leaked, and then that's when I kind of came across it. And I was just like, fucking scammers out here trying to pump and dump, but let me just go check out what this is. So I went and checked out what the project was, and I was just like, holy shit, like this is exactly what needs to exist. You need to be able to have privacy. You need to be able to have volatility, and because you want to speculate. And then you also need to have the ability to have stability. And so I think that idea there, that promise of building kind of an offshore bank account where you can hedge the amount of volatility or stability that you want in complete privacy, was just the vision that kind of glued and attracted a lot of the early community. So as the project kind of went along, I actually started contributing to the design, because I looked at it and I was just like, this is too complex. Everything in Monero is just a little bit too advanced for like the average user. And I've been building kind of complex systems for quite a while. So I knew that I could simplify the project down if I had enough control over it. So I started wanting to kind of contribute to the product and simplify it and design it. In parallel with that, these guys were starting to run into some roadblocks in terms of the developing. And from my experience building startups and building a lot of kind of products and businesses, I was able to kind of figure out, at least in my own opinion, what these guys were like. And in my opinion, I kind of thought that maybe they were too young, that they hadn't really had to work with large teams. They hadn't really refined their communication style or approach or frequency. So like a lot of us in the community were like, what is going on? Like there's no communication here, and so on and so forth. So the product ended up getting to a point where they got stuck. They got stuck on the math because it was too complex to figure out. Monero, at its core, is one of the most advanced cryptocurrencies on the planet. So the amount of people who actually have the know-how on to just understand Monero at a base level, and then to take parts of it and then re-engineer it to do what that original vision was, is very, very small. And so this is when Seb would be kind of piping up and calling the project a scam and all that kind of stuff. And while we don't think, and I have nothing nice to say about the original team, because they left and they abandoned and they lifted it almost in a state of disrepair.
Yeah.
We don't think that they...
Pierre, if I apologize for the interruption. I'm sure that if I can get those interviews with some early members of the team, I'm sure we'll find that there was a huge, massive, tangled web of problems that they not just that was left in disrepair, but that third parties and other actors intentionally came in to sabotage the state of development at that time. I'm not going to name names, but I know for a fact there were people who were actively trying to dox the initial team, and there were people who were actively trying to undermine hosting and repo security and all kinds of things. So there was
it was being attacked at one way or another from lots of different directions, and so the project got to a state where they couldn't continue, and instead of being kind of mature and I don't know, having some humility and saying, hey, look, we need help. And keep in mind that Dweeb and I had been offering to contribute the entire time. And they were just kind of like keeping us at arm distance and kind of like rejecting us. And that's kind of when I decided to kind of pull back and not contribute anymore, because I was like, this is my spidey senses are tingling here. So I decided to kind of step back and kind of just let it play out and see where it would go. And then ultimately, while we don't believe that they started it with in a scammy way, they ended up basically exiting the project, taking all of the funds that was in the treasury, market selling that down. According to what we know on Bittrex, if you look at the dates, it lines up where there was a massive dump when they decided to leave. And then once that happened, then we went through the process of rebuilding it, taking over control of the project, forking it, kind of going into a new Discord, and basically the rebuilding process. So that's a very long-winded background with Cliff Note type style annotations of what happened in the past. There's plenty of details in there, but that's for the most part what happened. So in short, two young guys came along, tried to build something that everybody knew or identified that needed to exist. As soon as they got to a certain level where they couldn't proceed because it became too difficult, they decided just to leave instead of asking for help. They took what assets that the project had, market dumped them, left us with nothing, and then we rebuilt the project from scratch from there.
Okay.
Jeez. And can I follow up at Nicole on that question then? Also, so picking up the project from there, as opposed to attempting to take something of a blueprint and then start all over, completely rebrand, what was the thought behind forking or picking up the torch there versus creating something that was inspired by Haven and just saying, hey, this is something new. It's like Haven, and maybe we'll even do like whatever, an airdrop to Haven coin holders.
I can promise you that all of these discussions happened. This was a discussion, and I was actually one of the most vocal people for that, because there's a certain stain that you can't get off of a project once certain things happen. And we have found that even in today, people still think that we're a scam, even though we're not. But because we're associated under the same brand domain, the same protocol name, the same token, we decided to kind of live with that. So we did have those discussions. We did think about kind of calling it something else, but we've already had a community in place. And even though there's no kind of formal structural governance, we kind of just have, like if everyone kind of wants to go in a direction, then some of us will kind of give way and then move in that direction with the team to keep it moving. And that's kind of what I did. I was vocally saying, hey, look, let's go in a different direction with a fresh brand name where we're not tarnished by these other developers. But then the team just kind of decided that it would be the best approach to just kind of leave everything as it was and then try to rebuild from there. And I kind of went along with that as well. And fully supported them on that journey. So there will still be artifacts of the behaviors of those past developers that we might not ever be able to get rid of, but the project is in good hands. It has guardians of the project, so to speak, that will do everything that it takes to ensure it has the best chance of survival and thus success. And so we just have to live with some of the things that the previous developers had done in the past. So
Got it. It sounds like then the decision so far, you most of the leadership team views it as net positive. I know Jay Riggs, for example. First up, what's up, Johnny? He's been a member of my community for some time, and I mean, his involvement in Haven, among a few other projects, has been largely why he has no time for anything else. It's a brilliant problem to have, right? That the fact that a project is succeeding enough that it consumes that much of your time and attention. But clearly, most of you, this is the direction you did take as net positive now, or is there still some dissent?
No, it's all net positive. Like we have very strong debates, and I'm a very passionate person. I'm a person who, you know, I'm a stubborn person, but I'm also not blindly stubborn. I know when to go. I know when to take my foot off the gas and when to kind of just support it. And the truth is there is no other way. You have to do things as a group and consensus, and everybody's going to make trade-offs at some stage throughout this process. And it's about kind of trying to let your ego go and not take everything personal and look at it from a higher level perspective and saying, hey, what is the best chance, or what is the best thing for the project? So yeah, there's no dissent amongst the team. We'll always, whatever's in the past is in the past. We've all agreed on it. And then we just basically try to play our cards the best way that we can based on the things that we had dealt with at the time. These are evolving organisms. This is not a static environment. The target is constantly moving. It's constantly coming in and out of focus. It's constantly moving in horizontal or diagonal planes. It's kind of like this perpetual dangling carrot that you just have to, you have a blindfold on and you're just trying to grab it and go based on feel about what to do. And
sure. Yeah. It just happens to be on a 3D sort of parkour level playing field, right?
Yeah, exactly. With everyone trying to like knock you out and kind of get rid of you. So if you like that type of environment, it's the perfect space to be involved in. If you don't like that environment, then it's just stay away.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Can I ask, as far as team also, so somebody who's not really super active in the space anymore has turned a lot more towards the infosec space, and is not a name that, I mean, some people know him or knew him, but a known good actor, Paladin or Eemper-deen. Any input from Paladin at all anymore, or like when was there a clean break there?
I haven't heard from him in a while, so I think he was in a couple of the discussions, but I haven't had any more interactions with him or any kind of communication with him for a while. But don't hold me to that, because Discord has like, I don't know, probably 100 channels, and like it's just hard keeping up with one or two. So I don't go into every single channel to check. So you probably have to ask him, because I'm.
Well, I did ask him recently. He's much more focused on the infosec work. He's based in Israel, so I mean, there's plenty of it, right? For people who are skilled within infosec. But just curious, because again, just another known good actor. So I mean, kudos to the members of the team that were there for the change management, who I've met personally. Like, without shilling, I can just say you guys have always had quite a high degree of confidence from me, just based on the people who I've been able to interact with. So.
And I think too, this is something that kind of Dweeb understood as well. It's very difficult to have completely anonymous and private members of the team these days, just given what's happened internally within the project with the previous developers, to the maturity of the space. Well, that's a big in quotes maturity, where people have higher standards of evaluating teams and backgrounds. And so this is one of the reasons why Dweeb and Niak were public, and they decided to kind of do a public good on behalf of the project, and to let everyone know who they were, so that there was some kind of real person tied to these kind of what is it, GIF emoji or whatever the avatars are that we all use.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and emoji, right? If you're on iPhone. Ugh.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And I apologize, Nicole. I took a strong detour there from the initial questions, and Pierre has been given sort of like a rough outline of the sorts of things that we might ask. These are the things that we ask every project, so it's not like, we don't have some secret questions lying in wait to really try to sting you or a gotcha your way. We're not out to destroy any projects. Like, I think for both Nicole and my part, we're fairly anti-tribalist in the space. Not a big fan of whatever Monero versus Ryo currency, or Ryo currency versus Sumo coin, or now Haven versus like some other coin that has a really strong pegging proposition. Yeah, I don't even know what else compares right now, but
so is it okay? Can I jump in? Like with the tribalism question, I just something came up on Twitter a few days ago. I posted something about Haven, and I said, I think that Haven's going to do really well. And someone from the community responded in this conversation saying, not shelling Haven 24/7 is basically supporting surveillance state, and China is a surveillance state, and they have concentration camps, so you're basically supporting concentration camps. So I mean, I get the humor, but I kind of just I want to talk about what do you see for the future? I mean, how bleak are things in terms of privacy and security and surveillance? And do you think that Haven is the only safe haven?
Womp womp. We had to go there.
Yeah. There wasn't a better word, okay?
So it's a very good question. I think that privacy has been and always will be undervalued. And we've seen how we as consumers are willing to forfeit so much of our digital personal lives and information in just for convenience, right? So I always try to look at, when I'm evaluating things from a high level, I try to look at the intersection between the axes of consequence and the axes of convenience. And I think what we've seen here is that there's been a massive shift in kind of the consequences of our convenience. And so we have mega global corporations like Facebook and Google and all of these social companies who, for the most part, generate profit off mining your personal data and then putting it into a graph database and then mining all of the connections and building a very detailed overview of who you are as a person and taking that and selling it to effectively the highest bidder. And so long as you have a checkbook, there's no shortage of the information that can be found out about you. And that's just on the social side, right? But then we have an entire financial ecosystem that's designed for the most part to mine all your credit card data. And all of this really sophisticated technology is only designed just to advertise, to sell you things, to have things sold to you and to give you information to other people. And that's just a very perverted system. And so I tend to take the belief, or I shouldn't say I, because talking on behalf of Haven, that people deserve the right to privacy. And you don't have to, it's not about hiding things because you have something to hide. It's about giving you the right to the privacy that you deserve. And we have been kind of, almost conditioned to think that seeking privacy is because you're running from something or that you're a fugitive or that you're hiding something. And that's just not the case. And so when you look at all of these exchanges or all of these ecosystem players who are afraid to list privacy coins, what they are effectively saying is that if we can't trace and track every single possible thing about you, you cannot be a part of our platform. That is not how the system is supposed to work, So I think that Haven is one of the most, obviously, even with deducting the bias that I have, I think it's one of the most important contributions to the ecosystem. Whether it succeeds or fails is a different question. I don't think anybody knows that, but I think that what we have contributed to the ecosystem is a meaningful, tangible contribution. And regardless of what happens to the project, something in this space, in this little avenue, will succeed, and people will have a cryptocurrency that is usable, that is private, that is democratized, that is globally accessible to everybody else, and that is censorship resistant, and it can't be shut down. And I think that is just important, especially the state of kind of like the geopolitical climate, given the behaviors of banks, whether they are the ones, according to the FinCEN leaks, facilitating $2 trillion worth of money laundering, or whether it's they kind of I'm losing the word off the top of my head, whether they're kind of discriminating against people because they're not of a certain income bracket, tax bracket, race, color, creed, whatever it is, removing all that discrimination and giving people access to an alternative financial ecosystem is something that I think we as human beings deserve. So regardless of what happens with Haven, I think we've made a meaningful contribution, and whether we succeed or somebody else stands on our shoulders as we stand on Monero's, will come along and solve this problem for the good of humanity.
That's brilliant. Can I ask, so related to Nicole's questions about tribalism, and part of the reason that I love conducting these interviews with NrdGrl is that she's dialed into a bit of the game theory that comes from people's tribal affinity. And I mean, this moves markets, as I'm sure you're aware. So I've got to ask, what's been your reception from the Monero community or the broader crypto note community?
It's been, I think Monero as a community and as a technology takes the right approach, which is that we're not going to co-sign anything. This is effectively a meritocracy, and if you do something worth acknowledging, you will be acknowledged. But until you do that, our lips are sealed. And I like that approach because it makes you strive for more. We want to impress the Monero community because without them, without their years and years and years of engineering, research, cryptography, math, product development, we wouldn't exist. So what we have seen is, I think generally speaking from the wider Monero community, is not that much acknowledgement yet. However, we have seen a few people coming over and acknowledging us for what it is. Like, hey, this is a quite ingenious solution. This is pretty well done. It's all open source. It's been audited. There is no pre-mine. There is no ICO. There is no venture capital put into the project. This is a grassroots project that has been built in many ways in the same vein as Monero. Monero was forked from, I think, Bitcoin, right?
Not Bitcoin, actually. It was well, there's an interesting history there, but it was the second majorly public reference implementation of the crypto note spec. So they're closely related, but at this point, Bitcoin and Monero are quite different.
Yeah. So but they took it in a new direction because the old guy was a bit of a dick from what I understand, and then they took it and they turned it into something else, or helped it realize its truest potential, and it's just something that we're also doing on the Haven side. So this is not a cash grab. This is not a get rich quick scheme. We're asked over and over again about, like, are you going to jump on this kind of Ethereum mania hype train yield farming thing? And it's just like, no, like we have to take things a little slow, and we have to do things in a much more careful way for various different reasons. But, we have had, there's a guy on Twitter called Cryptonomicon, I think was his name, if I can remember his handle. Mm-hmm. And he started off, he made a tweet. He's like, effectively he's saying like, I've heard about this Haven project. The dev reward kind of sounds like it's just a way to enrich the founders. Like, once you do the math on it, it is, you would make more money probably working at McDonald's. Anyway, so then he actually kind of almost had like a stream of consciousness and was tweeting about it. And it was amazing for us to see someone coming in with that critical perspective and then arriving at the conclusion when they were just like, holy shit, this isn't just a stablecoin. This allows for an entire ecosystem of private untraceable assets, all built on Monero. This is phenomenal. And now he's kind of bitten off on it, that this is a legitimate attempt at building a private stablecoin or an ecosystem of private assets, that the team is aligned with kind of pure principles of just wanting to build this and put it out into the wild and give it to people, and it's not a money grab, and everything is open source. So it has been cool to see people slowly coming around. And to be honest with you, I don't think any of us would expect just this global shift, like a school of fish in the water, just going, oh, Haven is shit, boom, Haven is the best thing in the world. I don't think that we'll have that happen. It'll be a slow process. And so be it. That's fine. We're not intending to go anywhere.
Okay, got it. So then it sounds like you're hoping for Senpai to notice you, but not yet. It hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, like I'm sure we're on the I guess like the radar of some of the Monero community. I know that Niak and Dweeb were talking with Sarang about some of the implementation details of kind of, I think it was either the C-Slag algorithm that would allow us to do Haven effectively, the offshoring. So he had kind of given us a couple of pointers when Dweeb and Niak were getting stuck. So it's just a process. Like, you know, if you're seeking I think it's important not to seek validation, but just to continue trying to fulfill your vision and the promise of the project. And validation and all that kind of stuff will come later. It's not why we're doing it, but you know, it would be nice to have some of the Monero community take a look at us, vet it for themselves, and give us their positive or negative feedback on it. And we intend to contribute back to the Monero ecosystem soon as well. So it's not a one takes all type thing. Got it.
Well, maybe towards the end of the interview, I've got a couple of very brief suggestions for ways that maybe that can happen. You know, hashtag not advice, right? Everyone's got an opinion.
So I've got something related to something that you've already said, Pierre. Earlier this month, actually just yesterday, looks like this happened yesterday, sorry. Luke Loam tweeted, whoever successfully solves the algo-backed untethered stablecoin challenge will become $1 trillion coin. Add privacy to that and you have the new world currency. And a Haven community member, Brew PH, wrote, is it dawning on you how big Haven could be? Mm-hmm. So I also kind of want to tie that to something that you mentioned and that we talked about in our show on Monday, which was the SEC's recent deliberation or recent statements about stablecoins. And they ended up ruling that not all stablecoins are securities. However, they said that certain fiat-backed stablecoins, Monday's statements would appear to apply to fiat-backed stablecoins only, not algorithmic ones. So the SEC's crypto czar, Valerie Stepanek, said during last year's South by Southwest, with algorithmic, that you may be getting into the land of security with algorithmic stablecoins. So, yeah, I guess I want to talk about the potential that Haven could be ruled a security and what your thoughts are on that.
So Haven as itself does not touch fiat in any single way. It is not a collateral system, like MakerDAO, for example. You are not depositing assets to then borrow against the other. It is a process where you mint and burn. So you destroy one asset to create another. In that process, it is completely decentralized. There is no third parties. There is no slippage. There is no exchanges. It is basically taking an external price source, putting it into the blockchain, and then letting a user convert between those two assets whenever they would like. So I think most of the concerns around utilities versus securities is, well, specifically around stablecoins, is are you touching fiat? And I think if there's anything that's clear, is that the entire space is unclear on what is what, right? And so it's also important to take a look at Haven from a much higher level. Like, we always keep coming back to this idea that we didn't do a pre-mine, we didn't do an ICO, we didn't take venture capital. the project is completely sustained by a 5% block reward. So basically, if 100 Haven is mined on a block, then we would get 5, for example. That has sustained the entire project. There has been no other external capital. So when you're looking at a security, they have a few basic tenets, right? So one, was there an investment of money? It's cryptocurrency. There's always going to be an investment of money. Two, was there an investment in a common enterprise? Haven is just a GitHub project. There is no enterprise. We're not a company. We didn't raise money to build this out. It's just an open source project that we took over from somebody else. And I think the last one is there I think the last one is there an expectation that that the profit will depend on a group? So I don't know. We'll have to see. But at the end of the day, again, this is not legal advice. If you look at these tokens or these cryptographic systems, they're just systems built on faith. If people lose underlying faith in the system, they all go to zero. So I'm not too sure how we would be a security in any way, shape, or form. It's unstoppable. There is no entity. I don't know. I'm not too sure.
Can I ask as a follow-up? So the assets such as XUSD, XGold, etc., those assets that are available today, mm-hmm. Is there liquidity on exchange right now to buy directly into those assets, for example?
There's not now, no. So I think one of the kind of things that we need to work on or find ways to provide people the ability to get into XUSD first without having to go through XHV. So whether that was kind of like an XUSD Bitcoin pair or some other kind of fiat off-ramp, maybe someone builds kind of like a debit card that has XUSD on it so that you can actually spend your money.
I think you're going to find massive pushback trying to get Visa or MasterCard backing for something like that.
Yeah, I would expect that too. But again, that wouldn't be coming from the protocol side. That would be having someone having to go off and to build it. But that wouldn't be us building it. And I think that's a distinction that needs to happen for a lot of people's expectations about, when you're building these projects, or like what you can and cannot do. There's a reason kids can just fire up a couple of Solidity scripts and launch a new token, and it goes boom and bust in 24 hours. Yeah. That's because they're doing it at a contract that sits on top of a protocol. We build the protocol. We have to take vastly different considerations into it. And it's the same reason that you're not seeing Ethereum build liquidity mining. So there's different considerations that have to happen for people working on the protocol layer versus some kind of layer 2. And our goal is always to keep that layer 2, that core protocol as pure and as safe as possible. So that's why we try our best to understand kind of what is happening in the space and what we can and cannot do.
Got it. So, Nicole, Pierre had mentioned to me earlier on that he has fairly limited time this morning. I want to give you an opportunity to ask.
I can take it a little bit longer. I'm enjoying this.
Okay. Well, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. We try to be respectful, but we also try to get down to questions that actually matter.
Yeah.
Which is why, Nicole, what do you have by way of follow up on some of these questions related to tribe and legality and such?
Okay, well, so for legality, I think that you've answered my question. There's tons of unclarity and we just don't really know, but the system is unstoppable, right? So my real only question remaining about tribalism is that I wanted to propose a tribe name for you guys because, there's the XRP army.
Hold on, I'm going to let you finish, but okay. Is there a bounty available for this sort of thing? I'll just ask on NrdGrl's behalf. No cut here.
It depends on how good it is. If it's good, we'll give a bounty. If it's bad, you pay us. So no pressure.
Okay, it's good. It's good. All right. Okay. I would like to propose that the name for those who support and back and promote Haven is the Havenites.
Oh, actually kind of like that. We do have a couple right now. I think the one that we have is Havernauts, like astronauts.
Yeah.
I kind of like that.
Yeah.
Havenites is actually kind of good too.
Here's why so I'm going to double down on Nicole's suggestion, and here's why. Because within your community, at any given point, depending on the percentage of liquidity that has been converted to a stable peg within the ecosystem, somebody can move from being a Havenite to an XUSDite, or to a Goldite, or to a New Zealand Dollarite.
The other thing too is that there's a double entendre in there, which is Haven Knight, which phonetically sounds like night, like kryptonite. No. Well, yeah, actually, no.
No, I'm hearing it. I do get it. And who knows? Maybe it'll be the name of your future proof of work.
Maybe. I'll submit that to the community and let's see what they say.
So I had a conversation with the community about this topic, and I think definitely tweeting it from you would be better, or more engagement. But yeah, there were some people having conversation, some saying liking it, some saying I don't know other names. I'm looking for it now, but it's somewhere else on the conversation history. It's not on this comment. Sorry.
It is amazing, kind of what these crypto communities can do when they kind of come together and kind of rally under a certain tribal name, so to speak. Like I think the XRP army is probably one of the most like legible examples.
Sure. Well, to your point, if there were no XRP army, there would be no Link Marines, right?
Exactly. Right. So you see these kind of, it's just such an interesting space to see. Even the shift in psychology from like looking at internal communities, like in Haven, like if the price is falling, then everyone's really worried. If the price is going up, everyone's just ecstatic. And there doesn't tend to be an in between. And it's the same thing on kind of macro crypto Twitter as a whole, where people are either kind of like prophesizing its death, or that it's ripple to $1 million or something ridiculous like that. So it's just kind of funny that everyone is almost has these binary outcomes or binary views of the space. And I kind of want to come back to what Nicole was talking about previously, where you're talking about the idea of a $1 trillion coin. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about the value of it, but one thing I would talk about is how limited I think all of our understandings are about the potential of this space and what it could do. And I don't think I think there's a lot of projects that are completely overvalued. I mean, if you're looking at kind of their market cap relative to kind of what they have done and what they have built or what is available to use, there tends to be some very outsized multiples on those. But I think even if you're looking at something like Ethereum, for example, a generalized blockchain that allows you to build decentralized applications on top of, there's no stopping that idea if it were to kind of permeate through the entire world's technological system. So you could remove a lot of that stuff, and then once everyone's kind of like, say for example, looking on Ethereum or using Ethereum, then you have people looking for alternatives because now they understand the downsides of having this type of computation system in the world. It's not the fastest, it's not the cheapest, it's not the most private. And so then you have people kind of starting to look for these alternative currencies or these alternative tokens, much like you were, much like I was in the beginning, where you just say, hey, look, now that I kind of understand this weird blockchain crypto stuff, I actually understand that it's not private. So I'm sure there's a bunch of companies making a bunch of money scanning all of these transactions, taking my public chain transactions, putting them into a database, going into the mempool, doing mempool analysis, and then understanding what I'm going to do before it's even concerned. I'm sure that one of these exchanges is going to get hacked at some stage, and then someone's going to be able to kind of cross-reference all this data and build this massive big brother-like system that will tell you the entire financial history of all of these public chains. And that's why I think something like Haven needs to exist. But it's also why I don't think that we actually understand how valuable, not just valuable, in a monetary sense, but valuable in a from a necessity perspective to people.
Brilliant. Nicole,
Yeah.
what other questions do you have? Because I've got some rapid fire stuff that hopefully I'm sure that Pierre and I'm sure the team have talked about, because again, based on my exposure to the members of the team, you're really intelligent guys, and I'm sure that the discourse that you have has brought up a lot of different perspectives. So I don't think I'll shock you, but I have a few things that I think maybe for the audience's sake need to be discussed.
Sure.
But Nicole, what do you have?
Yeah, the only other question that I have is, after the first time that you and I started chatting on Twitter, Pierre, you said that you were going to reach out to some Darknet markets to see about adding Haven as a potential coin for them to transact in, because that was the initial use case that I, saw for the existence of something like Haven, was because Darknet markets were not using Monero. And when I talked to some of the vendors, they said that the reason was stability. So that was that was the real, like, this needs to exist for me moment. And then after I tweeted that, you said that you were going to see if you could get in touch with anybody about that. And I wanted to know if you had done that, if anything like that had happened.
So I actually don't. Did I actually say that? Because I don't think.
Maybe it was a different community member, actually.
Yeah, that's not something that I would say.
Okay.
So that's not something that I am looking on. I am personally looking at, and I have actually never even gone onto the dark web. So
that we know of. It's always deniable. That's the great thing about it, right? Like,
yeah. Well, like I actually haven't. It's my reasons for this are very pure. It's not to get rich. It's not to exit scam. It's because I think that this stuff needs to exist. And if we're ever going to get to a certain scale, it's very important that we solve some very quote unquote basic things. A business, whether it's a mom and pop shop or whether it's a big commercial entity, is not going to use a public blockchain where all of their financial data, any of their income, is visible for all of their competitors and for the general market to see. This is why you have corporations that are private entities. Imagine if Apple's entire banking accounts were open and you could see everything that they were purchasing. You could then use that to derive when their product releases were going to be out. If you're an adversarial competitor, you could then kind of try to inject yourself and to manipulate some of their supply chain so that they couldn't deliver on things on time. You can then load up a massive short on the market so that when they ultimately miss those deadlines because you have interacted and got in the middle of their supply chain, that you then profit on them missing their guidelines.
Well, to be fair, these things do happen. Their patents do need to be made public the moment they're registered for, and they do publish quarterly reports. And we know for a fact that certain parts of supply chain have been disrupted, especially within the cryptocurrency space, in order to prevent one mining interest from being able to bring products to market. So these things happen all the time, actually.
It does happen, but you're right. They happen on quarterly statements. There is no real-time view into what is happening at a global scale within a company to the general public. That stuff is all kept very, very secret. And so it's also important that a small business, like if you wanted to sell T-shirts or cupcakes or whatever it was online, you're not going to want to accept a volatile cryptocurrency. And if you do, you're then not going to want to pay different spreads and fees to then convert it to a US dollar, right? Like it's just nonsensical. That is not how things are going to work. So we have to be able to find a way to balance volatility and stability. We have to find a way that allows people to hedge against different economic situations, whether that's them just wanting to put some money away for their taxes or to pay or to save for a holiday, or whether they want to take a macroeconomic play and kind of offset against US dollar and move into gold. This ecosystem needs to provide that level of kind of flexibility and personalization, I guess, in a sense to the users. And so that's why it's important for Haven to become a multi-asset ecosystem. And I'm sure different types of people will use it. I'm sure there's markets that that I don't approve of that might use it, but for me, my goal isn't to target. Our goal isn't to target, say, dark markets, because that's just setting yourself up for a lot of trouble. We just believe that this type of ecosystem needs to exist for just the average, everyday person that can't handle 20, 30, 40% price swings in a day, and just wants to have a little bit of privacy, have a little bit of stability, and then to be able to effectively use that in commerce to buy things big or small, or to send money to their friends without having other people surveil them.
Okay, brilliant. I think, ideologically, I think that Nicole and I, we've talked about these concepts. I mean, we bring it up practically once a week, talking about the importance of privacy. I mean, shoot, in order to conduct this conversation, Pierre, what did you have to download?
Jitsi.
Yeah, I mean, and my reason for wanting to use it, I mean, I invoked the holy name of Edward Snowden to get you to download it too, right? Like
this man knows the key to my heart.
Yeah, right. That, and hey, anybody who's watching, also like download Jitsi for video chats like this, multi-person video chats, and download Signal right now and get your friends and family to use it. Like this isn't a weird thing. You don't have to be involved in darknet markets to want more privacy. We don't think this is a weird thing, and we think more people should normalize this kind of behavior. Like,
yeah, I think too is that like a lot of people get scared about privacy, like it's this voodoo thing. Yet what you're actually seeing at a state level, at a nation state level, is nation states demanding privacy for their users. This is what you're seeing happening in Europe. So this idea that we've come to just think that privacy is a bad thing, it's just erroneous in my perspective. Like what you are seeing now, obviously there's when you're dealing with governments, they have to balance a lot of things, but for the most part what they are trying to do is to provide more privacy for their citizens. And financial security is just another version of that. What is all the biggest features of Apple, or what is a consistent thread that is coming up with all of their announcements? It's this idea of privacy. Why do they make sure that like your biometrics don't get stored in like plain text? That they're secured on a private enclave, to the best of my understanding. So privacy is just one of these rabbit holes of rabbit holes of rabbit holes. And there's a lot of great books on privacy, and the more you get to learn, the more you realize how exposed you are. But there is also ways to kind of get yourself up out of that, but it requires a massive effort. And this is not an effort that most average, normal, everyday people care to do or can do. So it's about what kind of technologies can you build that takes care of all of this for them, or as much of it as you can for them, so that they don't have to go do it, so that they don't then go have to unwind all their Venmo accounts and their PayPal accounts and then look at everything that they've spent money on, so that they don't have to then try to find a way to mix their Bitcoin to put into a fresh address. So that, so if you can just provide some base level of privacy that balances security, privacy, and functionality, it's a win-win for everybody. But yeah, for the most part, like our goals are just to bring the same level of utility, if not more, because crypto is still relatively underused, that all the other cryptocurrencies have, like Bitcoin and Ethereum, and making sure that people can use them with other vendors and other point of sale systems when they all come on. So our job is to kind of make inroads and massive developments on the privacy, stability, volatility, and the security side, and then kind of move in parallel with all of the advancements in the space as a whole. So integrating it into these other systems and building the gateways that allow it to have more utility. So
brilliant. The evolution of the privacy technology you've been talking about to this point, just going to ask a few questions that are kind of related to what you mentioned before, giving back to Monero and giving back to just the community, making sure that this tech exists and that it stands a fighting chance of being used. The place my mind goes, a couple of things, a couple of places actually. First, looking at the atomic swaps between Monero and Bitcoin. These are possible, and they've been possible according to a couple of audited white papers for some time now. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering, in terms of that already working, an omni-layer protocol within Bitcoin already has stablecoins. So if fees there are, say, preferable over Ethereum, where all of the other stablecoins live, which is like crazy now, because whatever you're paying, you could be paying 30 cents on the dollar for a transaction for stablecoin.
Kind of crazy.
Yeah. So, I mean, who really wants to do that? Even with Tornado Cash, which is a separate topic, it's been audited on multiple levels. ZK snarks for the privacy. It's apparently, as far as mixers go, it's the creme de la creme at 30 cents on the dollar or whatever it is you're going to spend.
It's much more than that. In fact, I put in like a little sample transaction the other day of 0.1 ETH at 380, so $38. And the gas fee for that was $58.
Yeah,
and this is where it comes back to not being everything to everyone, just trying to be the best at what you do. For us, the best is at being kind of private money and giving people the ability to do that in a seamless and in an efficient way.
Got it. So here's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering if there's any degree of development that that the Haven Protocol team has done that could inform the atomic swap motion of Monero. Only because of network effect, not because of merit right now, but only because of network effect. It's frustrating that Ethereum is used to the level that it is, which ironically is what's making it so painful to use, which is what's going to, again, ironically make it more used. Like it's a vicious cycle. So with what you're working on right now, though, respecting, again, tribal affinity for what it is and network effect for what it is there anything that Haven can do now to work within some of the projects and some of the sub goals of projects like Monero to do atomic swaps between Bitcoin? It seems like that's very important to Monero, is Bitcoin specifically, but omni-layer protocol allows for Tether to already live on Bitcoin. So I'm wondering if there's anything along those lines that's already been discussed by the team, or if that's roadmapped to have there be some kind of atomic swap motion where maybe it's not even between Haven and Bitcoin, or Haven and some larger cap coin, but Haven and Monero, which sounds weird, but or Haven and some other project.
Yeah, so I actually think that Bitcoin Monero bridge is probably one of the most important things that Monero is building in its future pipeline, and we are likely, because I don't send the transactions, but we are likely going to support that as well and make a financial contribution to that. And that is something that we would also likely add into Haven as well at some stage. And the reason for it is actually kind of simple. You never know what's going to happen with exchanges. The more voodoo-ish privacy seems to these exchanges, the more likely the chances of you getting delisted are, the more likely that there will be an impact on the accessibility of the asset. However, you also see tangentially big, massive white papers like, I think it's Perkins and Coy, who put out that 47-page PDF about AML and KYC for privacy coins. And they basically, at least in my understanding, kind of signed off on it, said like there's no reason why you can't do those on things like Monero. But I think in terms of building kind of robust systems that are censorship resistant and that can be accessible by anyone, you do need to find other ways to get assets into these ecosystems, whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's Monero, whether it's Haven or whether it's Monero, because people will need to access this type of stuff in the future. And everyone talks about kind of regulation and law and all that kind of stuff, but it skews so much in different perspectives in different jurisdictions. Like there's countries where it's illegal to be gay. There's countries where
it's punishable by death. Yeah, that's where it's like it's very illegal to be gay. Yeah.
Or being an atheist is a crime, right? So there is things like we can take this thing and say, privacy is bad, but bad to whom and for what reason? A lot of things that we would have no problems with or we are totally okay with in other countries are illegal and punishable by death, as you mentioned. So the idea that you build a universally robust system that is censorship resistant, that can't be shut down, that gives other people access coming from other assets is important. So we will likely support the Bitcoin Monero bridge, as well as look to enable it within Haven as well. And Haven and Monero are two completely distinct systems, and they need to exist differently and for different reasons. And forks for the most part are pretty simple to do, but and they're not really justified unless someone's trying to make quick money. However, the token economics of Haven and what it does at the protocol level cannot be done within Monero because it is a pre-existing system. Majority of it has already been mined, and so what you have is this what is really just an experiment in monetary system, an experiment in mint and burn protocols. And I doubt that any of the Monero community is going to be open to, I've said it before, I doubt that. Let me back up, because people say, well, why don't you just build this on Monero? And I said, well, the idea that the Monero community would be open to a bunch of four nobodies who have never done anything in the Monero space coming into Monero and saying, hey, we're going to take your multi-billion-dollar market cap and we're just going to burn it for this XUSD is something that would not go down. That's why it has to be a fork, because it's experimental. Monero needs to exist because it's a fundamental piece of technology for humanity, in my opinion. But we solve different problems and for different reasons. And we just are very fortunate and beneficial to be able to stand on top of Monero and then do some stuff on top of that. But the protocol itself is only has 4 people working on it. So there's 2 on the back end and 2 on the front end. So we're a very thin team in terms of what we are doing. And most of what we're doing is just kind of solidifying what we're doing. So today, we're not able to contribute engineering manpower back to Monero. However, the protocol does generate income, and we can contribute financially back to the Monero hopefully as an appropriate form of thanks for what they're doing.
Got it. That's brilliant. And I think that's really great that you guys you're choosing to do that. It's almost like a tithe, right? To whatever the high priest of privacy, so to speak. Pretty brilliant. I'm curious on this question of either collaboration or giving back or attempting to synthesize code bases and work on something that's mutually beneficial or just beneficial to the ecosystem. The Tari side chain of Monero, has this affected your work at all? Are you taking any inspiration from it? Do you think that there's anything by way of fully private by default stablecoins that will come inevitably in that ecosystem that will inform the approach of Haven, or at worst, I doubt it'll come to this, but at worst, invalidate some of the work that's been done by Haven?
I'm not too sure. My understanding of Tari isn't as intricate as my understanding of Monero, which still, to be completely transparent and honest, isn't at like a level of mastery. There's still things that I don't get about Monero, which I'm just like, holy shit, like these guys are geniuses. Like, who the hell thought of that? So like, again, it all comes back to what I said at the beginning, where it's all about perspective. If the goal is to provide tools to the rest of humanity that can serve and benefit them and give them options and flexibility and freedom, then having other competitors in the space is a positive thing. And we can move quite fast. Again, we don't have layers of bureaucracy. Our size is both a detriment and a positive. It allows us to be extremely agile. And the way that Haven exists is there is no limit to the amount of assets that can be on Haven. It can be, we could effectively privatize, not in the traditional sense, but make the entire world's assets private. There is no limit to that. So
can I ask, and I apologize for the interruption, just a deep question here, mostly because I want to be respectful of your time and get a few more questions in before you have to run. We lost one from the call, so I don't know, and I'm sure things can come up. On that note of being able to essentially make fully private and fully anonymous and fully data private the world's assets, what kinds of oracles or centralized systems does Haven rely upon to be able to ensure that price is accurate for, say, 4x items that you're trying to roll into a private asset like XUSD or like the New Zealand dollar or any other world currencies that the team has like Canadian dollar that the team has direct investments in?
Right now, that oracle is coming from Chainlink. And we had done internal conversations within the project about building our own oracle, but then that creates a conflict of interest, right? Like you basically want the point of the highest vulnerability, which is the pricing oracle, to not be handled by the team. If we were the ones constructing the pricing records and putting everything in there from our side, I don't know if that's as trustless as having someone who specializes in that, taking care of that for you. And so we often hear criticisms about oracles, calling it the weakest link. And so while we hear constant criticisms about
Sorry,
the problems,
that's got to be the best double entendre of the entire interview. the weakest link, bomb, right? Because Chainlink.
Yeah. So what was I saying? Minus my double entendre.
Just that you've been that's been a concern about it being weak.
Saying that everyone talks about its problems, but no one talks about the solutions. And so if you take our perspective, which is that we're just trying to provide tools to humanity that can give them freedom and choice and privacy, then it's not in our best interest to wait 10 years for a bunch of crypto maximalists to figure out what is the most optimal non-oracle situation that we can build, right? Like this technology needed to exist years ago. It's just existed 3 months ago. It came into, it was manifested 3 months ago after years of work. So the oracles is something that we don't take care of ourselves today. That is by with Chainlink, but we're always looking at ways to either increase the amount of oracles. Like the protocol itself can take any valid oracle provider. But that's all I can say on that.
Got it.
Right now.
Okay, that's brilliant. And then again, going back to that question of interoperability or the possibility of having just this idea, which clearly wants to be born, right?
Yeah.
It's an idea that's fighting to be free, fighting to have its moment right now, and come into existence in the best possible way, like you mentioned before, just recently manifest into the world, but it's still fighting to achieve its highest form. Within that, the other ecosystems that are being built, do you see the possibility of a bridge between Haven and, for example, Tari or any other asset issuance platform, either as an off-ramp so that people have options as to how they spend using, air quotes, legacy payment systems that already support some of these others, or is it really a question of doing the internal pegging within the Haven protocol and Haven network, and then attempting to get more vendors and businesses onboarded into accepting it?
So we actually get asked a lot about building an Ethereum bridge, mostly because that's where all the mania is happening and where everybody is basically minting magic internet money hand over fist.
Yeah, everyone's getting ridiculously rich, haven't you heard?
Yeah.
None of these new tokens are going to zero.
Yeah. You get rich until you don't, right? Like it all works until it doesn't. It's all good until it's bad. So a lot of people kind of think about just the pros that come from that. But really what you have to do is you have to change your mentality a little bit, because Haven is so unique in its construction. So Haven as itself is a private, untraceable, anonymous asset. As soon as you go outside of that asset, outside of that ecosystem, you lose some of that benefit. There is no shortage of stablecoins. So just having a public private coin, a public stablecoin, like let's call it a wrapped version of XUSD, does nothing. It does nothing. It strips it all of its functions and purpose of existing. So there's all of these trade-offs that come once you move the asset outside of its native protocol. So a lot of people ask us, well, why don't you build a bridge between A, B, C, or D protocol, or asset, or wrapper, or whatever it is? And I'm sure someone someday will build that. But it's actually much easier for us to just make those assets synthetic within the ecosystem.
Sure.
Why build a bridge to Ethereum when we could just do XE? Why build a bridge to some kind of gold custodian provider who holds gold bullion and we reconcile all that when we could just make X gold? right? So we have to take the almost like a Dijkstra's algorithm, which is the shortest path, right? So the shortest path is for us just to mint those assets within our own ecosystem, and then make selective but strategic and wise long-term decisions about the bridges that we do decide to support in the future. I think personally speaking, just on behalf of Pierre, I think that the Bitcoin Monero bridge is a very, very important thing because they face the same issues that we do.
Well, to be clear, they're not even just building a bridge. They're actually these are proper atomic swaps in which the circulating supply of Bitcoin and the circulating it's not that you can actually audit the circulating supply of Monero, but the circulating supply of Bitcoin is honored, right? And not altered in any meaningful way.
Yeah. So like that in itself is a massive thing. But where I was going with it is that anyone who offers the level of privacy that we do is going to have the same problems. And so today, that is just for simplicity's sake, Haven and Monero. The benefit that Monero has is it's being grandfathered in, right? So it has a certain level, just by virtue of its time in existence. It is already on platforms, and because it has a certain market cap and a certain community size, that other exchanges will list it. We have a slightly more difficult time because now people are a little bit, they're okay with grandfathered in assets, but bringing in new ones can bring in a little bit of friction. So it's important for both projects to find other ways for people to enter into the system, and gives people the ability to come into the system without having to go to an exchange and pay some massive trading fees. So like the idea that you can have this swap that allows people to exit without going through an exchange is a positive thing. You likely wouldn't have to deal with slippage, I'm assuming, so long as you can agree on like kind of like a spot price. So if you can do that in a trustless and atomic way, either on Bitcoin or on Monero or to some other or Haven or to some other kind of blockchain, I think that's a positive thing, and I think it's something that we will strongly support, either philosophically, technically, or financially.
Okay, great. Then my armchair offering then for contribution here is that please look into the work that Monero has been doing with the atomic swaps to the Bitcoin network, and look seriously at the OmniLayer protocol, which is not, it doesn't really get a whole lot of love, but there's a sizable number of millions of dollars of tether that exist on that platform. So if these atomic swaps can be extended to the OmniLayer, then I mean that problem is solved. You may be able to do an atomic swap or contribute, and maybe there's already some work being done within the Monero community, Monero Research Labs, to do that atomic swap, and to, at the time of transaction, at least peg to the US dollar within Tether. That may already exist. That may already be, rather the building blocks for that particular bridge may already be available.
So I actually have a question for you that you might be able to answer. So the risk with Bitcoin is that you can taint coins, right? So it's not fully fungible. So if, let's say you had someone who's done illicit things and they have these Bitcoins from these dark markets, and then they want to do an atomic swap back into Monero and then get that anonymity, then the counterparty risk is from the person with the XMR going into BTC and then assuming that those BTC coins aren't tainted, therefore they still have the same level of fungibility when they go over to an exchange, and then they sell that into fiat if they have to pay some bills or buy a house or whatever that might be. How is Monero looking at solving that problem? Or is it not a problem that they believe in solving for themselves?
Yeah, I'm not a direct contributor, so I'm really just becoming acquainted with this new proposal to do the atomic swaps between Monero and Bitcoin. So yeah, the counterparty risk is it's ever present in Bitcoin, right? Like I have friends.
It's ever present in any network aside from Monero and Haven.
Yeah. Well, I mean, now with Tornado Cash, there are a lot of people in the space. I'm just gonna name and fame here. Richard Hart. when he moved from being a Bitcoin maximalist into saying, now I'm an Ethereum maximalist. Oh, and I'm launching my own project on Ethereum. What was the first thing he did? The first bit of contract code that he had audited was a fork of Tornado Cash that supported his project. Clearly, mixing on Ethereum with Tornado Cash with ZK Snarks, it works. It obfuscates CoinTaint clearly. So he's not worried about counterparty risk. And within his ecosystem, like this is the degree to which I will talk about Hex publicly. Yeah, they've got a massive market cap. They probably should be on page 1 of several exchanges because of how big their market cap is. But he didn't dare dip his toes into those waters until he knew for a fact that he could get away with it.
Yeah, it's an interesting space.
Yeah. So just to answer your question though, counterparty risk and coin taint. I don't know how Monero is going to handle that with the atomic swaps between Monero and Bitcoin, but I know in terms of network effect, man, this is, you guys are going to feel the waves once the ripples make it out to Haven development. I truly believe you guys are going to feel waves from it. It is going to grow, and that swell will grow into waves by the time it hits. It hits from somebody saying like, well, why would I use Haven when I can? This plus perhaps the Tari ecosystem may be starting to offer similar functionality to Monero users.
I think we just need to follow along with Tari and see, how they evolve. From what I understood, it was basically like allowing you to sell like digital assets like tickets, but in a private way. And I think I have spoken to Dweeb about it before, and he said that what we do is a little bit different from the mathematical side of
I believe it. I believe that absolutely your implementation is completely novel. And that's why I think you may have the opportunity here to contribute back meaningfully enough that at least from a development standpoint, this is not me, by the way, trying to tempt you with all that money, right? But I wonder if there's enough of a bounty available within the Monero research labs and community that at this point, just saying, hey, look, this is the right time because the idea wants to be free and because humanity deserves this function, right? They deserve this ecosystem to be able to securely and privately peg their value, either flipping between high volatility or stability. Yes, right now, Tari, they're billing it as something that could be for tickets or whatever else, like NFTs, right? But let's be real. That's how Ethereum launched too. Where has it gone? I mean, there's no limit to what people will decide to do the moment they know, like, oh, I can create a digital representation that is not duplicatable, but now it's provably private, right? Like you have to have view keys, or like with proper OPSEC, you can make it totally private. I'd be very shocked if there isn't a Tari version of either Tether or a similar type, a similarly backed stablecoin. Like it would just, I would be absolutely shocked if nobody steps up and just says like, yeah, sure, whatever. We won't even go all in, right? We'll get a small investment from this fund over here of $5 million. So there's $5 million of stablecoin on Tari now, or whatever. It has to happen, right? Because the idea wants to be free. It has to happen. So
yeah, it just depends. Like I think in general, what the space needs to do is I think it needs to have a number of projects working towards similar goals, because I think the space is too big, and the need from the perspective of humanity is so great that it's too big for any one organization or project or product to handle. I think this has to be a systemic approach. And so, unless I'm delusional, like it would be nice at some stage if, we get to a certain level of credibility in the Monero community based on the things that we do and who we are as a project, and the fact that we are aligned towards kind of pure principles. Like, for example, can you think how many projects can you think of that have built an innovative, novel solution to a problem that needs to exist and hasn't taken money from anybody?
Oh man, yeah, that's rare.
It's rare, right? Like, and that's not to say that that it doesn't exist, but it's hard to think of, which means that it's a foreign concept, right? Like, because we are just used to projects coming along, raising a bunch of money, and keep in mind, whoever you raise money from, you're beholden to in some way, shape, or form. You have a debt to pay. That this is capitalism. It's not philanthropy, right? And so, I think that different people are going to have to take different approaches. So you have kind of Monero, which is this grassroots community managed project, who is the base for both Tari and Haven. But then you have Tari, who's also raised, I think, 2.5 million or something like that. So they'll have different incentives to something like us that is also grassroots. But then when you have capital behind you, there's a certain kind of esteem that comes with it. There's a certain level, depending on your investment, that who you raise from and who is on that team, that allows you to kind of like cut the line, right, and just be evaluated in a completely different plane.
Yeah. And there's also anti-fragility. I mean, being funded, it really, I mean, it definitely helps you sleep a little easier. Helps sleep a little bit easier if you're the guy developing the product, right? To know, like, hey, cool, the lights won't be shut off tomorrow. I mean,
yeah, like and those are. I can promise you that those are the concerns that we have had at Haven at times. Like, how do we pay the server costs? You know what I mean? Like, a 5% dev reward only equates to, I think, about 12,000. I think it's. I haven't checked it recently, but I think it's about 12,000 XHV a month. So when you're getting down, and keep in mind, before the mainnet, Haven was basically around 30 cents.
Yeah.
So that is not very much to cover the operating costs and just the need to have the server bills, host whatever it might be, and then have enough to pay the team to eat noodles. Right?
Yeah, no, I hear, well, and you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like within that space, like from a dev fee, because then members of the community, like the more diehard members of the community, say, well, you need to have stronger hands. Why aren't you letting some of these coins season? You're dumping on the community, right, to pay these costs.
Yeah, like and it's just it is not a environment that you can win. You are going to someone is going to critique you no matter what you do. I would like to think that our approach is the most practical, fair, ethical, and moral way to build these projects, which is to take the absolute least. Even if we dumped, which we don't, everything that we earned every single month, it would be impossible for it to move the market. Like it's just not enough. You know what I mean? Like you can go look at the order book now, and there's people buying and selling more than the entire project makes per month, right? So it's impractical. And really, what you want to evaluate when you're looking at these projects that are earning income is, what is the ability for the project to basically exit scam, you know, and then dump on the market. Well, first off, when it comes to can the Haven team exit scam, the answer is no. First and foremost, because one, it's not a scam. Two, there's nothing to exit. You know what I mean? So it's like from an external evaluator's perspective, it's as close to pure as you could possibly get. I think in a modern blockchain environment, you know, like in 2017, it was common for projects to raise hundreds of millions of dollars in you know, in a couple of days, and they never deliver anything.
Well, they've got an inverse incentive. They've got no incentive to deliver anything. They've only got incentive to look busy. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And with $300 million, you can look really busy for quite a long time. Right. If you gave me $300 million, I'll look busy. I'll look like I don't sleep. But this is kind of coming back, and I do want to touch on a point that Nicole, I think, misrepresented a little bit, was that the protocol has to do things in a legal way. We're not looking to build this kind of tool that gets us in trouble. We just believe that the space has evolved to a point where there is stablecoins and there is privacy. So the idea that you have privacy and stability is a common sense mathematical equation, right? Like, why would you have only privacy and only stability and only stablecoins? Like, no, those two things, based on simple evolutionary principles, they're going to intertwine at some stage and build something new. That is what Haven is. And so much like we didn't follow the 2017 ICO boom, mostly because we didn't exist at that time, but there was still a window, right? we didn't do an ICO. If we did an ICO, we would be in different legal in a different legal status. We would be questioning ourselves: has what we've done right or wrong? But we didn't do that, so we don't have to answer that question. And in the same way that this yield farming is happening, like a lot of these things are securities, right? So if we jumped on that, then we would have the same concerns as if we did an ICO back in 2016. So we have to move in different ways. And for us, like we on the website, it says like, don't do anything illegal with Haven. We do not encourage it. Like, do not to not pay your taxes. Pay your taxes. Do not use it to do illegal things. Just do things, right? And so, like, I know that this type of tool brings value to a lot of different people, but just do things the right way. Like, just do things how you'd normally do in real life. You can't stop people from using tools to do bad things, right? You can build good tools and people do bad things. So, for example, Elon Musk could build a Tesla that doesn't use any gas and it's a net positive for the world, but then a serial killer wants to use it to drive it into a crowd, right? So you can't stop people from abusing the tools that you create. But don't use Haven for illegal things. Don't use it to evade taxes. Do it just because you want to be able to balance privacy, stability, and volatility all within your wallet without having to go to third parties or trust other people, and be able to do that from any device in the world without having to ask anyone for permission. That is why you should be using Haven, and that's how I hope people use Haven. Brilliant.
And to be clear, I very much agree with that. The way that you've gone over that. Little bit of disclosure for the audience. I'm interested in selling Haven merchandise because the artwork, the licensing of the artwork permits me to put it on clothing. So I think I needed to disclose that earlier on in the conversation. Probably I have an interest in Haven. I mined it some time ago. I'm not like some whale or whatever in the space, but disclosure statements are important, right? People need to know that there's
and we're actually going to release an e-commerce tool that allows you, that has a WooCommerce integration. I think we're going to make an announcement about that soon.
I'm so glad. I'm glad that you're doing that, because I was going to offer. We've got a developer that's helped us integrate several coins into our e-commerce payment gateway, but they're bullish on ERC20 coins because they're easy, right? Just want to explore.
Yeah, so I'll make you a promise that as soon as it's ready, I'll hand that over to you, or I'll ping you about that. You can put something up there, and I'll be the first customer through that, and I'll buy a shirt or some kind of merchandise with XUSD or XHV. And this is part of the practical part, right? Like, what you're trying to do isn't illegal, right? Like, you just have some goods and services, or basically goods that you want to sell, and you want an easy way to be able to accept payment for that. Likewise, I want to buy some cool stuff, and I just want to be able to send you the payment and get it back, and know that you receive that payment, and without you then getting to peer into my personal finances to see how much XHV or XUSD that I have. And it's such a practical tool. We don't need to get into these very illustrative concepts or ideas or things about what it could be used for in all of these alternative worlds. It solves a problem today. It solves a problem that everybody said literally is impossible to solve. You cannot solve this. And through this process, we have made mistakes. We have misunderstood the greed of others and how it can harm the ecosystem as a whole. And the mistake that we made there was that we made the system too trading-like. And we made two mistakes. We made the system too much like a trading system, and we made the fees, which is really a deterrent, too low. So the ability to trade in and out of Haven, coupled with fees that were too low, made it an economic attack vector for certain individuals, and it got exploited for a certain amount of time.
Got it. Was it exploited algorithmically? Did somebody actually write code to
No.
persist
It was actually. I mean, do you have time for me to explain what was going on?
Yeah, a little bit.
Basically, an early investor in Haven was able to basically spike the bottom, and they invested enough meaningfully that they had, I don't know, like 600,000 or 700,000 Haven at the time. I think they invested like 50K at 8 cents or something like that.
Jeez.
Got completely lucky, right? And I say lucky because this was deemed impossible. The amount of people on Earth who can figure this system out is two. It's dweeb and yak, right? They figured out how to do it, how to solve this mathematically. So he got lucky that we just happened to be the group who promised that we could deliver it and then delivered it. And then the market kind of kicked up and it took off. So this individual was basically doing all sorts of manipulation techniques. So they had enough XHV where they could manipulate the order books. So they could spoof orders on the books. So they could put in an order, a sell order for, let's say, 50,000 Haven. So as someone looking at the books, you're going to take off your buy orders because you can see that there's a ceiling to the price. We are not going to get through this price. Therefore, it won't go above a certain price. So I'm going to remove my bids, and other people are going to sell in front of the other seller. So then it's going to bring the price down. And that person can just bring that big block sell order down, and it'll suppress the price down. But then they can put in buy orders underneath everybody selling into them, right? So you put a big order on the sell side, everyone looks at that, starts selling it. Because there's less liquidity on the buy side, the sells have a downward effect. And then that person is basically able to put their buy orders in. So everyone's selling into them, and then they remove their big order on the sell side and then let the price go up. And that's how you can manipulate the books manipulate the order books. So then on one side, they're doing this on exchanges and spoofing and manipulating the order books. And then on the other side, they're in the Discord, then fudding and making up all sorts of lies. And because they were telling us, we are going to collude to manipulate this price, and we are going to attack this the day that it is available. They were sending us screenshots of their balances. So in Haven, you can actually see the amount. You can't see the addresses, you can just see the amount. So we're able to then understand, okay, well, this person is moving, he has 2 wallets and they're moving relatively this amount in and out. But it almost came a situation where the dog was wagging the tail. So as this person was, one, manipulating the books to suppress the price, they would basically manipulate it, move into XUSD, continuously manipulate the books and suppress the price, so it would depreciate, and then they would decide to move back in to XHV, and they would profit between the. You basically had a guy who spiked the bottom of the market and invested enough where he had a meaningful amount of tokens. And then on one side, he was then manipulating the order books to make sure that when he moved into XUSD, it would go in at, say, $1. Then he could suppress the price down to 50 cents and then move back into XHV and then profit 50%. But because he had such a large stack of assets, he was then able to effectively profit very handsomely moving in between these assets. And because other people can see the amounts, they would move with him. So it basically compounded the effect. And so if we didn't step in and change the fee structure to make it more detrimental, we would have headed to hyperinflation and the project would just die. And so we're trying to basically prevent that from happening. So that's when we changed the fee structure to something that's far more detrimental to manipulators. And it stopped. And just by implementing those fees, like if you were to go to Haven now and you were to go to network.havenprotocol.org, you'll be able to see the real-time view of the inflation impact. So you can see now that we are actually under the mining emissions of what would be the normal circulating supply without offshore and exchange functionality in there. So we are deflating right now. So you'll be able to see, have you pulled that up?
I have.
Yeah. So if you go down to the impact of onshore inflation, you can see I think the purple line is the standard emissions curve, and the green is where we sit at within an inflation if it's above the purple, and then deflation if we're below the purple. So you can see that we've completely deflated and we have less. Now that it is designed to change and to fluctuate. So it'll likely go between inflationary and deflationary. But the basic idea is that the more people who are in XUSD and the more rapid the price appreciation, the less XHV there will be in supply, because when they come back in, they would have lost effectively the difference between when they went offshore and when they came back onshore. And while that's removing assets from the circulating supply, it's not changing the dollar amount that you have, right? So if you had $100,000 and you went into XUSD at $1, you'd have 100,000 XUSD. But then if Haven went up to $2 and you move back in, you'd have 50,000 XHV, but you'd still have $200,000 worth. So that is the benefit here, and the idea that you don't have to trust anyone. You don't need a buyer or a seller. You don't need permission is I think, such a revolutionary idea. And I'm so glad that at least got to participate in this type of thing existing. Like I don't work on the protocol side. So there's a lot of stuff, especially in the math and like I can't even read the math in the stuff that that we wrote, right? Like
no,
it's just,
I'm with you. Thank goodness that there are people who are into that thing, and thank goodness for programs like Excel and like RStudio, because I couldn't do this stuff on a table napkin.
No, like I can't even read that level of math, but that's Dweeb's background. He's a mathematician, and he's been working in this space so long. Like I think his degree or something was in like cryptographic systems. So it's not just the cryptography; it's like implementing that within computer systems. And so they've had him and Nyack have been working together for 20 years, side by side. And they have a lot of patents. Oh, I know of at least one patent that they have in encryption and encrypting video streams. So it's likely that the thing that's encrypting this conversation is potentially something that they built. Don't hold me to that. I can't promise that, but it's got something to do with like video encryption. So these I completely forgot. I went off on a tangent, but
well, hey, I think you went off on the right kind of tangent, bragging about the team, which I think is brilliant. Pierre, I think to respect your time today and also to respect the amount of time that is probably necessary to give audiences the full 360 view and the full texture and flavor for the project. Can we set up a follow-up in which we have Dweeb on the call, or which we have maybe more of the team? Maybe I'll bug J Riggs and some others who are contributors, and maybe we can get even a full roundtable.
Yeah, like I think the best person to have on here will be Dweeb, because we can answer the questions from two completely different perspectives and ends of the spectrum, but still consolidate around the single vision, which we have, because we're all aligned on this. And so you'll probably notice a lot of my my comments are around kind of like the product, the ecosystem, the technology, the vision, and even and kind of where we're going to go at in the future and what the opportunities are. But if you want to get into the dirty, nasty, filthy mathematics side of things, Dweeb is your person there. He's probably the only person who actually understands how it works. So yeah, let's do a follow-up call and bring Dweeb on. Yes, we are very, very short on time, but this is kind of like a pleasant conversation, so I have no problem going on. But we have so many things going on right now, and I think everybody underestimated how much of a toll that it would take, and the amount of time that it takes. This is a full-time job, so it's very time consuming. But at the end of the day, it's worth it. These tools, like I've said many times in this call, need to exist. It's important that they exist, and I'm proud that I'm with a group of people who are doing this for the right reasons, and that this tool now can be used by other people. So I'm looking forward to seeing it kind of penetrate more of the ecosystem and more of the industry as a whole. And it'd be interesting to see just how things evolve. If there's anything that I do know, is that I don't know shit, and that everything will continuously change and evolve. And it's good to have a great team to work beside you, both on the protocol side, the product side, the communications, and the marketing side. And as we grow, we are looking to bring in additional help from protocol engineers to front end developers to marketing and communication. So if anyone is interested in and has found what we're talking about to be intriguing or interesting in any way, shape, or form, jump into our Discord, introduce yourself, say that you heard us on the show, and we can kind of go from there and see how we can potentially collaborate together. And so yeah, let's sort out another follow-up call where we can talk about like the more technical side of things.
Awesome. Yeah, would love that. Can I just ask to wrap things up, what specific need do you have? What's the greatest need the team has right now while you're at the level of basically community contribution and people who are, not in it for a paycheck today?
Yeah, so there's basically two things that we need help with. In short, when you're a small team, you need help with everything, everywhere, at all time, right? But to be very, very specific about what we would really enjoy having some help with, it'd be on the protocol side to co-develop with NrdGrl. So basically, how it works is you have Dweeb doing all the mathematical stuff, and then NrdGrl implements that. And then they put that into kind of the protocol and the RPC and all that kind of stuff. And then Marty implements it on the front end, and then I make it just kind of try to look good. So we need help both with Marty having a co-developer to help on some like the Monero library stuff on the front end side. So the Node, the React, the JavaScript side. And then we need some help on the protocol side with NrdGrl, and then doing like C++ and then all of the crypto node stuff there. So those are our two specific needs or desires if we could magically find someone. So that's what we would ask. Okay. And if anyone has any other skills that they think that contribute, we're not going to be picky. Well, actually, no, we will be picky. Actually, let me take that back. We will be picky, but we're always looking for people who can complement the team and the product and help us move this forward into mainstream culture and have it adopted all over the world.
Okay, brilliant. Well, Pierre, I really appreciate. You've been so generous with your time today, and you're great. You took a couple field tackles, right, slide tackles, and got back up, and kept running today with questions about the atomic swaps and Tari and potential competitors and whatever else. Granted, let's be real. I kind of pulled some punches too. I'm not out to try to I'm not out to try to clean your clock, throw haymakers. But you've been such a great sport about doing this and so generous. So. Thank you again for making this happen. Thank you in advance for circling back with Dweeb and the rest of the team. This has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of the video. If you want to be notified of videos like this in the future, first off, click subscribe, press the bell icon, and click all notifications. Additionally, you can sign up for the Mind Your Biz email newsletter. That'll give you exclusive access to certain freebies, notifications for deals within the cryptocurrency mining space, as well as some of our flash sales for merchandise, which you can buy with cryptocurrency. That's right. It's the only cryptocurrency merch that you can buy with cryptocurrency. We practice what we preach. As always, thank you so much for watching. You're the reason I make this media. I love your face, and I will see you in the next one.